the first meeting in the financial year and the 54th meeting of the Monetary Policy Committee overall. The year has begun on an anxious note for the global economy. Some of the concerns of the trade frictions are coming true, unsettling the global community. We at the Reserve Bank, while remaining alert to these global developments, began the year celebrating the completion of 90 years of this august institution since its inception way back on 1st April 1935. The Reserve Bank's journey over the last 9 decades is closely intertwined with the nation's development and progress. As a custodian of monetary and financial stability, the Reserve Bank has evolved itself over the years into a full-service central bank with varied functions facilitating a market economy. Indeed, a very, very long journey full of accomplishments and achievements, something which every RBI is proud of, and something I believe the whole of India and its citizens are also proud of. In this challenging global environment, the Monetary Policy Committee met on the 7th, 8th and 9th of April today to deliberate and decide on the policy repo rate. The global economic outlook is fast changing. The recent trade tariff-related measures have exacerbated uncertainties, clouding the economic outlook across regions, posing new headwinds for global growth and inflation. Amidst this turbulence, the US dollar has weakened appreciably, bond yields have softened significantly, equity markets are correcting, and crude oil prices have fallen to their lowest in over 3 years. In fact, as we speak, it is about $60 to a barrel. Under these circumstances, central banks are navigating cautiously with signs of policy divergence across jurisdictions, each reflecting their own domestic priorities. The Indian economy has made steady progress towards the goals of price stability and sustained growth. On the inflation front, while the sharper than expected decline in food inflation has given us comfort and confidence, we remain vigilant to the possible risks from global uncertainties and weather disruptions. Growth is improving after a weak performance in the first half of the last financial year, 24-25, although it still remains lower than what we aspire for. And now I come to the decisions of the Monetary Policy Committee. After a detailed assessment of the evolving macroeconomic and financial conditions and outlook, the MPC voted unanimously to reduce the policy repo rate by 25 basis points to 6% with immediate effect. I repeat, the MPC voted unanimously to reduce the policy repo rate by 25 basis points to 6% with immediate effect. Consequently, the standing deposit facility, the SDF rate, under the liquidity adjustment facility shall stand adjusted to 5.75%, and the marginal standing facility rate, or the MSF rate, and the bank rate shall stand adjusted to 6.25%. I shall now briefly set out the rationale for the decisions of the Monetary Policy Committee. The Monetary Policy Committee noted that the inflation is currently below the target. It is supported by a sharp fall in food inflation. Moreover, there is a decisive and spending decisions both of businesses and households. Second, the dent on global growth due to trade frictions will also impede domestic growth. Third, higher tariffs shall have a negative impact on net exports. There are, however, I may say, several known unknowns. The impact of relative tariffs. Our relative tariffs vis-a-vis some of the other countries are quite low. Then there is the unknown of the elasticities of our export and import demand and the policy measures adopted by us. You are all aware that India is very vigorously and proactively engaging with the US administration on the foreign trade agreement. These are just to name a few. These make the quantification of the adverse impact on growth difficult. The risks to inflation, on the other hand, are two-sided. On the upside, uncertainties may lead to a possible currency pressure and therefore imported inflation. On the downside, slowdown in global growth could entail further softening in commodity and crude oil prices, putting downward pressure on inflation. Overall, while global trade and policy uncertainties shall impede growth, its impact on domestic inflation, while requiring us to be vigilant, is not expected to be of high concern. Coming now to our growth outlook. Real GDP, as you are all aware, this year, as per the MOSPI figures, is expected to grow at 6.5%. This is on top of a 9.2% growth rate observed in the previous year, which is 24-25. In 25-26, the current year, prospects of agriculture sector remain bright on the back of healthy reservoir levels and robust crop production. Manufacturing activity is showing signs of revival, with business expectations remaining robust, while services sector activity continues to be resilient. On the demand side, bright prospects of the agriculture sector bode well for rural demand, which continues to be healthy, while urban consumption is gradually picking up with an uptick in discretionary spending. Investment activity has gained traction and is expected to improve further on the back of sustained higher capacity utilization, government's continued thrust on infrastructure spending, healthy balance sheets of banks as well as the corporates, along with the easing of financial conditions. Merchandise exports will be weighed down by global uncertainties, as mentioned earlier, while services exports are expected to remain resilient. Headwinds from global trade disruptions continue to pose downward risks. Taking all these factors into consideration, real GDP is now projected for this fiscal 25-26 at 6.5%, with Q1 at 6.5%, Q2 at 6.7%, Q3 at 6.6%, and Q4 at 6.3%. While the risks are evenly balanced around these baseline projections, uncertainties remain high in the wake of recent spike in global volatility. You would have noted that the growth projection for the current year has been marked down by 20 basis points relative to our earlier assessment of 6.7% in the February policy. This downward revision essentially reflects the impact of global trade and policy uncertainties, which I had highlighted a little while ago. Coming to inflation, the headline inflation moderated during January-February 2025 following a sharp correction in food inflation. The outlook for food inflation has turned decisively positive. The uncertainties regarding Rabi crops have abated considerably, and the second advance estimates point to a record wheat production and higher production of key pulses over that last year. Along with robust Kharif arrivals, this is expected to set the stage for a durable softening of food prices. Sharp decline in inflation expectations
अनुज यार, ऑप्शन ट्रेडिंग में मार्केट इतनी वॉलेटाइल है कि कंसिस्टेंट प्रॉफिट निकालना मुश्किल सा हो गया। गलत एंट्री ले लेती हूँ और फिर पूरा लॉस हो जाता है।
ऑप्शन ट्रेडिंग में सही टाइम पे एंट्री और एग्जिट करना ही सब कुछ है। अगर तू अपने काम में बिजी है तो यूनिवर्स ऐप यूज कर। यहाँ तुझे सेबी रजिस्टर्ड एक्सपर्ट्स के रिकमेंडेशंस मिलते हैं और साथ में परफेक्ट एंट्री और एग्जिट पॉइंट्स। और सुन, टाइमली एग्जिट नोटिफिकेशन भी।
वाह यार, ये तो बढ़िया है। मतलब बस फॉलो करने से प्रॉफिट का पोटेंशियल बढ़ सकता है।
एग्जैक्टली 40 लाख लोग ट्रस्ट करते हैं इन्वेस्ट ऐप पे, तू भी कर।
वाह यार, ये तो बढ़िया है। अभी इंस्टॉल करती हूँ मैं।
तो देर किस बात की, अभी इंस्टॉल नाउ बटन पे क्लिक करो और अपने ऑप्शन ट्रेडिंग को स्मार्ट और प्रॉफिटेबल बनाओ।
यूनिवर्स पे आपको मिलेगा वेल रिसर्च्ड इक्विटी फ्यूचर्स एंड ऑप्शंस रिकमेंडेशंस, टाइमली एंट्री एंड एग्जिट अलर्ट्स, access to exclusive screeners. Download the Univest app now and stay Univested. Investments in securities market are subject to market risks.
Q3 at 3.8% and Q4 slightly higher at 4.4%. The risks are evenly balanced. I now will be speaking on the external sector. India's services exports remained resilient in January-February of this year, driven by software, business, and transportation services. Going forward, net services and remittances receipts are expected to remain in large surplus, partly offsetting the trade deficit. The current account deficit for last year as well as this year, 25-26, are expected to remain well within the sustainable level. On the financing side, gross foreign direct investment (FDI) remained strong during the period of April 24 to January 25. Last year, which is the latest data period for which we have the latest data, reflecting India's strong macroeconomic fundamentals. Net FDI, however, moderated sharply during this period due to higher repatriations and outward FDI. Net FPI inflows to India stood at $1.7 billion during 24-25, supported by debt inflows as the equity segment recorded net outflows. This is much lower than what we had last year. External commercial borrowings and non-resident deposits, on the other hand, witnessed higher net inflows compared to that last year. As on 4th April 2025, India's foreign exchange reserves stood at $676.3 billion, providing an import cover of about 11 months. Overall, India's external sector remains resilient as the key indicators stay robust. I will now be talking about the liquidity and the financial market conditions. System liquidity was in deficit in January 2025, with net injection under the liquidity adjustment facility scaling a peak of more than 3 lakh crore rupees, in fact 3.1 lakh crore rupees on 23rd January 2025. However, as a result of a slew of measures, and I'll not go into the details thereof, you are all aware of them, of the various OMOs, the CRR rate cut, the swaps that we have done. The system liquidity deficit tapered, therefore, during the last 2 months of February and March, and further it turned into a surplus on 29th March 2025. Further, coupled with the government spending picking up pace during the latter half of last month, March, the system liquidity further improved and it stood at a surplus of 1.5 lakh crore as on 7th April 2025, and even yesterday it was 1.4 lakh crore rupees of surplus. Reflecting these developments, the weighted average call rate softened and remained near the repo rate since the last policy meeting. The spreads of 3-month CP and 3-month CD rates over the 91-day Treasury bill rate have also softened since the second half of March, suggesting an improvement in liquidity conditions. I would like to mention over here again, I am reiterating this, I have said this earlier, which is that the Reserve Bank is committed to provide sufficient system liquidity. We will continue to monitor the evolving liquidity and financial market conditions and proactively take appropriate measures to ensure that there is adequate liquidity in the system. Coming to financial stability, well, I do not have much to add from my previous policy statement in February. Things are more or less looking similar. The financial soundness parameters of the banking sector continue to be robust. The liquidity buffer in the banking system is well above the regulatory threshold. Profitability indicators are also healthy, reflecting robust operational efficiency of the system. Similarly, the system level parameters of NBFCs too are very sound. Now, as has been the practice, I shall be announcing some additional measures. This time I have 6 additional measures to announce to all of you, and these relate to banking regulation, fintech, and payment systems. First, we propose to enable securitization of stressed assets through market-based mechanism. There is already a mechanism of securitization of standard assets. The same is now proposed to extend with modification to stressed assets, and I may add that this is in addition and this is not in lieu of the existing ARC route under the SARFAESI Act of 2002. Second, we have guidelines on co-lending. They are presently applicable only to arrangements between banks and NBFCs. Moreover, they are restricted to priority sector loans. To exploit the huge potential of such lending arrangements, it is proposed now to extend these to all regulated entities and to all loans, priority sector or even outside the priority sector. Third, loans against the collateral of gold, jewelry, and ornaments, commonly known as gold loans, are extended by regulated entities, both banks and NBFCs, for both consumption and income generation purposes, in order to harmonize guidelines across various types of regulated entities to the extent possible, keeping in view their differential risk-bearing capabilities. We shall issue comprehensive regulations on prudential norms as well as conduct-related aspects for such loans. Fourth, to harmonize the regulations governing non-fund-based facilities across regulated entities, we propose to issue comprehensive guidelines. Instructions related to partial credit enhancement by regulated entities are also proposed to be revised. This is also, if you will recall, a budget announcement relating to NABFID by the Honorable Finance Minister in her budget speech for this year. This is expected to broaden funding sources for infrastructure financing. The draft of these 4 guidelines and regulations are being published today itself for public consultation, and we shall finalize these guidelines based on the feedback received. The other 2 announcements relate to, first of all, enabling NPCI to decide in consultation with the banks and other stakeholders the transaction limits in UPI for person-to-merchant transactions. This limit, as you are aware today, is 2 lakh rupees. We will give the freedom to NPCI in consultation with other stakeholders to revise it as per the needs of the economy. If I overhear that the P2P transaction limit, which is 1 lakh rupees as of now, will remain the same, and there is no change with regard to the regulations in regard to P2P or person-to-person payment transaction limits. The other and the last measure that I have to announce today is regarding the regulatory sandbox. We are making it theme neutral and on tap. At present, there are actually 4 themes on which people and businesses can work on this sandbox. Now we are making it theme neutral and on tap. Necessary directions for the implementation of these two measures shall be issued separately. To conclude, the global economy is going through a period of exceptional uncertainties. The difficulty to extract signal from a noisy and uncertain environment poses challenges for policy making. Nevertheless, monetary policy can play a vital anchoring role in ensuring that the economy remains on an even keel. In our context, as I mentioned earlier, the domestic growth inflation trajectory demands monetary policy to be growth supportive while being watchful on the inflation front. We are aiming for a non-inflationary growth that is built on the foundations of an improved demand and supply response and sustained macroeconomic balance. As before, we shall remain agile and decisive in our response and put in place policies that are clear, consistent, credible, and in the best interest of the economy. Thank you, Namaskar, and Jai Hind.
आरबीआई गवर्नर संजय मल्होत्रा अपनी पॉलिसी पेश करते हुए दूसरी पॉलिसी में लगातार नए गवर्नर ने आरबीआई की तरफ से मॉनेटरी पॉलिसी कमेटी की सिफारिशों पर ब्याज दरें घटाई है। इस पॉलिसी की जो बड़ी बातें हैं मैं तुरंत आपके सामने रख दूं, उसके बाद एक्सपर्ट्स के दमदार पैनल से हम करेंगे बातचीत, करेंगे पूरा विश्लेषण। आरबीआई ने 1/4% ब्याज दरें घटाई और अब ब्याज दरें घटाकर कर दी है 6%। मॉनेटरी पॉलिसी कमेटी ने ये ब्याज दरें सर्वसम्मति से घटाई हैं। तीसरी बात यह कि मॉनेटरी पॉलिसी कमेटी ने पॉलिसी का रुख न्यूट्रल से बदलकर अकोमोडेटिव किया है, जिसे एक पॉजिटिव माना जा सकता है। महंगाई आरबीआई के 4% के लक्ष्य से कम है। खाने पीने की चीजों में जो तेज के दामों में जो तेज गिरावट आई है, उससे महंगाई को लेकर आरबीआई का भरोसा बढ़ा है। ग्रोथ में रिकवरी है, लेकिन ग्रोथ की चिंताएं अब भी बरकरार है, क्योंकि ऊंचे टैरिफ से एक्सपोर्ट पर नेगेटिव असर पड़ने का डर बना हुआ है। वित्त वर्ष 2026 के लिए आरबीआई ने अपने जीडीपी ग्रोथ का अनुमान 6.7% से 20 बेसिस पॉइंट घटाकर 6.5% किया, यानी कि आने वाले वित्त वर्ष में, जो कि अभी अप्रैल से शुरू हुआ है, ये चालू वित्त वर्ष जो मार्च 2026 तक चलेगा, इसमें ग्रोथ थोड़ी सी कम रहेगी, 6.5% के आसपास। वहीं इस वित्त वर्ष में पहली, दूसरी और चौथी तिमाही के लिए जीडीपी ग्रोथ के अनुमान थोड़े से घटाए हैं, तीसरी तिमाही के बरकरार रखे हैं। वहीं वित्त वर्ष 2026 के लिए सीपीआई यानी कि महंगाई का अनुमान 4.2% से घटाकर 4% किया है। यहाँ ग्रोथ का अनुमान भी 20 बेसिस पॉइंट घटाया है, महंगाई का अनुमान भी 20 बेसिस पॉइंट घटाया है। और एक और आखिरी बात, सिस्टम में पर्याप्त नकदी बनाए रखने के लिए आरबीआई कदम उठाता रहेगा। ये कुछ बड़ी बातें हैं इस वक्त पॉलिसी की जो आपके सामने आती हुई दिख रही है। आइए, एक्सपर्ट्स का पूरा पैनल हमारे साथ कार्यक्रम में है तैयार और उनसे लेते हैं पॉलिसी पर उनका पूरा विश्लेषण।